Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. This is Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law, and I am delighted to have Anthony Crowell with us today. He's Dean and President, Professor of Law, and Director of the Center for New York City and State Law at New York Law School. Welcome, Anthony.
Thanks for having me, Patty. It's wonderful to see you.
I noticed that you started teaching at New York Law School in 2003, and since then you've had a very successful deanship. But why don't you start by just sharing how you got into the academy, and then we can talk about your very long tenure as a successful dean.
Sure, thank you. So I am in a category of dean known as non-traditional, although I like to think of them as now neo-traditional, given the longevity of a small group of us who came from practice. And I did start at New York Law School in 2003, thus marking my 23rd year here as part of this wonderful community. I actually started teaching, though, back in academic year 1999-2000 at Brooklyn Law School, right across the river. And I started teaching state and local government law there. And a lot of what I was teaching was based on my time working in Washington at the International City and County Management Association, and certainly what I was doing at the present time in those days, which was working at the New York City Law Department. I'm a student of urban policy, and of course, law and state and local government law has been something that has been a deep commitment and a place where I have centered my professional life. And New York Law School's opportunity back in 2003 presented me with a chance to help students gain experiential learning by not only learning about New York City government in particular, but also they were all placed in different city agencies. So I was working with agency counsel and helping to supervise students and shaping an opportunity for them to learn about public service lawyering. And that is something that rooted me at New York Law School, and I became very involved in not just teaching, but programs of the school, the Center for New York City Law, as it was called at the time, and really became deeply engaged in student life here, working with students and shaping public service career paths. And when the deanship came open, I had not necessarily thought about the position. At that time, I was counselor to Mayor Michael Bloomberg, a position I held for nearly 11 years. And I didn't have plans to leave City Hall, but New York Law School tugged at my heartstrings, so to speak. Substantively, the mission of the school and who the school served historically. It's a school that was founded in 1891, and it really resonated with me and who I was. It's a school that has many first-generation students. I was a first-generation student, and many students whose families arrived here from other countries. And interestingly, my mother's family, immigrants from Italy, their first stop was in Brooklyn after they arrived at Ellis Island. And Ellis Island opened the year NYLS had its first graduation, so there's an interesting connection.
Wonderful. So when did you become the dean, and how long has that tenure lasted, and how long do you think it will last?
Sure. So I became dean in 2012 at a very interesting time, of course. It was a time when legal education was still grappling with the effects of the Great Recession. And as we all know in legal ed, those effects lasted for many years, well into 2015, even 2016, in terms of the impact on careers and opportunities. And so I came at a time when all of legal ed was grappling with that, and New York Law School was acutely dealing with it. There were a number of challenges that the law school faced. They had over-enrolled significantly and had just built a new building, and it needed to have a wholesale repositioning of the institution and a restructuring of a lot of programs and approaches. And so to do that against that backdrop was a substantial task. And as a new dean, I was 41 at the time, coming out of City Hall, not having higher ed administration or even having been a full-time faculty member, there was a lot of learning to do, to say the least. But it also provided the school an opportunity, and I think that's why they hired me, to bring some fresh perspective. And at the same time, I understood what the school was about, what its history, its roots, its ethos, and its potential. And so a deanship was born, and I just completed my 14th year. I'm very proud of that. It's a long time. There are not many deans who have served at a single school for that long who are currently in their positions. And it's been an extraordinary ride. We've done a wholesale restructuring of the school, and I'd love to talk a little bit about that. But I've also signed up to stay on till at least 2032, bringing
Oh
me to
my
20
goodness.
years. So it's an interesting time.
It is an interesting time, and how smart New York Law School is to commit you for 5 more years, 20 years in the deanship. You, of course, are very correct that there are not many deans that have served as long as you have. I'm just working on finalizing the dean tenure study, and it's more like 4 or 5 years. So you've already far exceeded the average tenure for a law school dean. And who knows how far or how high you'll be on the list by the time you get to 20.
People ask me about that. Where are you on the list? That's the Rosenblatt's Dean's List that we're talking about that AALS sponsored at this time. I think I'll be number 4 in July.
Wow.
And I don't actually think of that as a point of pride. I love our legal ed community. I think there needs to be deanships that last longer than they do. And I know there are many factors that cause them not to, and it worries me. I think communities are better served by longer rather than shorter tenures. And so, it is my hope that we return to that. I think communities, it takes time. It takes time to shape programs, to move things in a way that adapts to changes in accreditation, changes in the bar, changes in the way the employment market is looking to hire new lawyers. And of course, we have AI, and there's always economic cycles. So
yes, I completely agree. It's much more beneficial for the institution and for the students, the alumni, faculty, for longer term deans. So hopefully we can make some progress in the academy in that area. So tell me about the repositioning of New York Law School. I know that you have a Think Big curriculum and you refer to yourselves as New York's Law School. And so tell us more about both of those.
So when I was interviewing for this position, they gave the candidates a challenge. And the challenge was that they asked us, they were undergoing a site visit at the time. They asked the candidates, the final candidates, to read their self-study and to comment on the school's strategic plan and what you would do, where you would take the school. And my observation was that the school had many plans, but there wasn't a cohesive plan per se. And that's not per se unusual, but it is less the case now. I think more schools have a well thought out strategic plan and that aligns with accreditation standards and certainly with outcomes. And that's something that I've seen really change over my 14 years. But I said that I thought we needed to come to terms with who we were as an institution, that the most glaring and obvious asset to in my mind was New York. I believe in New York, what it represents, that I like to say all roads lead to and from New York. It's not entirely true, but there's something to it. And that building on our brand could really create an opportunity for us to help contextualize for our students and even more so for our faculty and alumni, how we serve not just the place where we're located, but the world around us because of that idea that New York is the crossroads of the world. And so we came up with, in my job talk, I came up with the idea of calling us New York's Law School. We're not just New York Law School, but we're the school of the city. And we, in many respects, given our age and given the history that so many of our graduates not only went on to hold key public service roles, but were really leaders in business and industry as well, not just lawyers. So there's a special and unique, I think, role that our graduates have played in helping build modern New York. And that New York's Law School motto celebrates that. And it's also a brand promise that we, as New York's Law School, create access and opportunity for the people who make up New York. And it's such, it's a world destination. There's people from all over the world. 50 languages are spoken at our school.
Wow.
That's a real point of pride for me. I am excited by that. It's a school where it was once described to me as we are a Manhattan institution. I said we're a New York City institution, but moreover, we're an institution that serves the world's needs. And so we are both local, regional, and more national and global as well. And it's great. And so we built the curriculum around that. Think big. Big is an acronym. I said we should do it as think big because if you're going to be in New York, you have to think big. You have to think at scale. You have to understand the opportunity for impact and also the kind of work. It's a little harder to get things done sometimes given the size of things. But it also stands for, the B is for business and financial services. The I today stands for innovation, but originally stood for IP, media, tech, and applied sciences. And G, of course, given our roots, government and public interest. And so those are the drivers of the New York, but really the global economy. And so our curriculum helps frame that at the earliest days for our students and helps them to see the interrelated and interdependent nature of those three areas of law, which are multifaceted in and of themselves. And our students come away with a great set of skills, obviously core knowledge, and they have a lawyer's toolbox that really helps them navigate what it means to be a New York City lawyer.
First, I want to say what a great idea of the law school and their search committee to share the self-study and the strategic plan with the candidates and then have you review it. But man, did you hit it out of the park with the Think Big curriculum in New York's law school. No wonder they picked you 15 years ago and you continue to sit in that role. That's really exciting. I know you are a huge proponent of urban legal education, and it certainly comes through as you describe the role that the city plays in New York. How are your students serving the city?
Sure. So our students are serving the city in a broad array of ways. I will say that the city is really a living, breathing ecosystem. And it's constantly changing. And we try to ensure that our programs have both an enduring quality to them, meaning that there are some things that will always be important to New York, that will always be something that we need to serve. Immigration, we have 3 immigration clinics. We have so many placements in immigration-related areas. That's really important. Our students are working throughout city government. They're working in literally dozens of agencies across the city and all 5 district attorneys' offices. They are working in state government offices, and they're doing really interesting work. Some of them are litigators, some of them are working in regulatory capacities, some of them are advocates. Many of the New York City government agencies, they're advocacy agencies. They work with our communities, they help connect communities to resources, and there's a lot of community-based lawyering that the government itself helps shape. So I'm really proud of the work they do. It's really interesting. We're one of the top feeders, if not the top feeder, to the New York City Law Department, which is where I started my career. We're proud of that. That is only 6 blocks away. It's ironic that my entire legal career has been spent in a six block radius, but I think it's pretty diverse and pretty fabulous.
That's amazing.
I think over 28 years now, over 28 years, I've only gotten off at 1 subway stop. So but location is everything. And so Lower Manhattan has been that destination.
Oh, that's awesome. So what are some of the things, now that you've been there 15 years, you've had a chance, of course, to implement what your vision was for the institution. And I know that evolves as the legal education ecosystem evolves. But let's talk about some of the current initiatives that are going on at New York Law School. And after that, we'll talk about what you're looking forward to in the future.
Sure. So one of the things that we're very focused on is bringing lawyers in to help with place-based strategies. And that goes to your question of what are our students doing? And one of the things that we created recently, which I've been very excited about, is our Plumeri Center for Small Business Empowerment. It is part of our clinical program. We have created a nice constellation of opportunities for students. We have a small business clinic. We also have a patent law clinic, a trademark clinic, and a veterans advocacy clinic. Lots of ways to help in terms of building small businesses. And one of the signature projects that we're doing principally through the Small Business Clinic is we're working to build in our area here in Lower Manhattan in Tribeca. We've just helped create a merchants association. Post-pandemic, the neighborhood was very strained. It had dramatic losses of businesses that were owned by people who had really had a vision and served this community for a very long time. It was a substantial loss to see those businesses go. Because we're located adjacent to the Civic Center, and the financial district. A lot of the remote work influenced that. There was far less activity. And so you saw both a downturn in terms of small businesses, but also the physical nature of the neighborhood declined. It was not as well maintained. There are storefronts that are dark or boarded. And so we thought we would work on a revitalization initiative. That revitalization initiative started with a pandemic relief task force, and it's morphed into merchant organizing. And now we're looking to create a business improvement district. I like to say that there's a tale of two Tribecas. The west side of Tribeca tends to be, it's more residential, it's better organized, it has more resources. The eastern side does not. And that's the Civic Center. And we have to remember that 25 years ago, 9/11 happened. The Trade Center is right at the base of Tribeca, right down 8 blocks from the law school. And there is a profound infusion of resources to ensure that this community could thrive again after such devastating loss. And a lot of that has been lost. So through all those activities and influences, we're trying to bring about a renaissance. And what's nice is to put students at the center of that. And it's pretty exciting.
I'm sure it's so exciting for them, one, because it's a neighborhood of where they're getting their law degree and doing their studies, but also what a huge impact for them to have if they're helping people who have been there for generations and were unable to survive some of these calamities, get back into business or ensure the future of their business. So yeah. I applaud that effort. That's exciting.
I should also mention that among our other big efforts, and I know a lot of law schools are really focused on this, but rule of law and civics is critically important to us. We're doing a lot of that work out of the Center for New York City and State Law, but also our Impact Center for Public Interest Law. And that's tremendously important. A lot of what we've done, I sort of thought about structuring through a project I did with Mark Alexander. I know you interviewed our colleague Mark from Villanova Law not too long ago. After January 6th, 2021, he undertook a book project that resulted in 14 deans coming together, each writing a chapter for this book called Beyond Imagination. And my chapter in that book was called Civic Anemia. And the idea was that what are law schools doing principally to ensure that the law students who are very motivated today have a strong enough civics foundation to engage in a program of legal education? And, it's a very legitimate question because civics education has so eroded over many decades post-Cold War and a lot of political machinations in different states about whether or not it should be a priority. And it's unfortunate. And sort of my commitment to say that we need to ensure law students have all the tools they need to engage with the material of a program of legal education. And then to think about also more deeply, how does a law school serve as a center for civic education for the communities it serves? And I think a lot of law schools didn't necessarily think that that was their role. But I think that in many ways has changed in recent years. And I think it's a wonderful thing. I think rule of law is something that is always on the menu. And we need to remember that. And I certainly think that civics education is tremendously valuable. Just this morning, I ran into somebody who was talking to me about the state of the world. And they asked me what I did. And I said I was a law professor. And they said, well, what do you think about what's going on in our government? And it was a broadly structured question, our government. And I said, it's complicated.
It sure is.
Which provoked really what I was trying to really suss out their question. And they said, it's really hard for me to read between the lines. I said, I think that's true for a lot of people. And then we had a nice discussion about civics education and the need to have it in more community-based, and law schools can play such an important role in that. And so that was very validating, and it was interesting to hear it described that way.
Along those lines, you were planning a Constitution and Citizenship Day Summit. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So last year, we had our inaugural Constitution and Citizenship Day Summit. It was in partnership with the Second Circuit. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals has a program called the Robert Katzman Justice for All Courts in the Community Initiative. And that's about civics education, mainly for school-age children, but not exclusively. And Bob Katzman was a mentor of mine. He was the chief judge of the Second Circuit at the time he passed. It was a devastating loss for us. And so this partnership is an outgrowth of a lot of the work he did, but it's really significant in terms of not just the convening power of a law school and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, but we brought together dozens of community-based organizations on our planning committee and to be part of the summit, which will now be an annual event. The summit is important. We had Justice Sotomayor as our guest. She was in conversation. I moderated a conversation between her and two Second Circuit judges and one of our New York State Court of Appeals judges. And it really set a wonderful stage for the work we did that day. We had over 550 people participate, and the outcomes were extraordinary. We had something called, in addition to a series of panels, we created something, and you might know that I like to think big for New York's law school. We had the Civics Schmooze. And the Civics Schmooze.
Schmooze is very New York.
Schmooze is very New York, but it was really important. We set up in our school different stations where different community-based organizations could, as people rotated through in an organized fashion, really discuss the work they were doing that was at the cutting edge of civics education. And we had the Public Theater there, New York Historical Society, New York Public Library, Brooklyn Public Library, and a very interesting presentation by the creators of the animated series Arthur. They're creating a new series called Shari and the Unfairies, and it's about fairness and equity. Our colleague Martha Minow, former Harvard Law Dean, is the curriculum creator for that, but it's really an impressive new play that I think has a lot of potential to become an animated series. And this year, when we do our second annual, that will be featured. That was in concept at the time, and they just had their first production in Atlanta at the National Civil and Human Rights Museum, and I was able to go. So
that's very exciting. One thing that has always impressed me about you, Anthony, is that you're such a collaborator and a convener. And I know that you have done that with the New York deans and standalone graduate schools. Can you share a little bit about what inspired you to do that and kind of what the benefits are of all of you working together?
Sure. I think I've always had a real commitment and understanding of the value of collaboration and coalitions. Certainly, my work in Washington, I worked at the International City and County Management Association for 5 years while I actually was an evening student at American University's Washington College of Law. That was all about coalitions. That was a national association of city managers, but it was a coalition that also included, beyond ICMA, the National Governors Association, National League of Cities, National Association of Counties, U.S. Conference of Mayors, and some other organizations. And I worked at the center of that for 5 years, not just on policy issues before the federal government, both Congress and administrative agencies, but I also, through the state and local legal center, that was part of the 7 organizations that were in the coalition. I worked on dozens of amicus briefs to the U.S. Supreme Court in state and city cases. And the power of that collective group, and that's a collective group of both elected officials and public administrators, was really important. I saw the value of it, and I brought that with me into city government, did a lot of coalition building in city government in terms of the power of nonprofit organizations to work with government to solve problems. And so it came with me to the law school. When the pandemic hit, all law schools were really struggling. All of higher ed was struggling. And the New York law schools, there were 15 of us throughout the state. And then there's Rutgers and Seton Hall in New Jersey, which sometimes we include them in what we do, which is nice. We were all in need of some inspiration and some support in terms of how we're handling the uniqueness of our programs. Obviously, universities had their own approaches, but they weren't law school specific. So I started bringing us together weekly to discuss issues. The most pressing issue when we originally started was the bar exam. How are we going to deal with the bar exam? Where was the bar exam going to take place? There was different ideas about whether it would be in person or be remote. It was complicated. And that was sort of the first issue among dozens that united us. And so we kept meeting throughout the pandemic. And then, interestingly enough, our governor, Governor Hochul, sort of became aware of the power of this group of deans that really cared and was making a difference. And she was restructuring the State Ethics Commission and designated the 15 law deans as an independent review committee to vet any candidates that would be nominated by various elected officials. So we were the ultimate screening mechanism, and we're written into state statute, which was interesting. And
That's really cool.
It's very interesting. Yeah, it is cool. And we had a dysfunctional state ethics commission. I had served on the city's ethics commission for 9 years during my deanship, the earlier days of my deanship. And so I took a little bit of the laboring oar in terms of getting us organized. The 15 of us work really well together. And the changes that have been made over 4 years have been significant as a result of having a less politicized appointment process because of the neutrality we bring and the rigor. And so that's further unified us. And so to this day, we meet every week. We meet on Fridays. Melanie Leslie, Dina Cardozo, and I co-host the meetings. If one of us can't make it, the other one was always there. And it's a wonderful community, and it's brought us the ability to advocate for our interests when it came to the State Court of Appeals and the adoption of Next Gen Bar. It has also helped us with advocating for a state backstop when it comes to financial aid. The restructuring of federal financial aid has the potential to be quite devastating. We have advocated, and there's a bill pending in the legislature now to create a loan fund, a direct loan fund to students that would pick up where the caps leave off. And so it's a nice group. And I think it's generated a huge amount of respect for each other's schools. While we, of course, are very careful about what we can and can't discuss to make sure there's no anti-competitive issues that arise, I do think there's just a wonderful respect for the uniqueness of our schools and the collective power.
And such impressive results you've had. I mean, those are really significant in 4 years, the results you've described. Good luck with the bill in the legislature. I know that's a problem we're all facing. And I think a nice segue into the final question, which is, what do you see as the future of legal education in the coming decade? We're facing many challenges at the moment, and you're welcome to consider them as well as anything else.
Sure. The immediate challenges, of course, are, and for us, and I know for St. Mary's and really most law schools, if not all, ensuring that there's broad scale access to legal education. That's critical. It's hard to have a discussion about the importance of rule of law and civic education and the value that lawyers bring to society and not understand that broad scale access is essential to making that happen and to ensuring the opportunities are there. But it's going to start with the availability of resources. So working hard to make changes to the federal aid program. Again, it's probably in the short term a little more difficult, but certainly over time that's necessary. But also finding ways to bring the cost of legal education down, ensuring that there's need-based aid. And these are things my school's grappling with. We have to figure out all these questions, but we're deeply committed to working through them. And of course, looking at how states can help with financial aid solutions. We're also under the threat of potential changes to our accrediting authority with the ABA. That could be very problematic. It's been a helpful thing to know that the accredited law schools throughout the nation, there's a common set of standards that we must meet, and that there's a common set of standards for licensure. That becomes problematic if there's a patchwork of accreditors. And so I'm hopeful that whatever changes, if there are changes made, we can still have that uniformity. That's critically important. I sit on the ABA advisory board that's looking at the standards, making some recommendations on certain reforms, but whether or not when their accreditation authority is reviewed this September, they remain in place, it's a question. The other thing is we'll deal with the implementation of the Next Gen Bar, but then and I think that most schools are planning for that, and that's well underway. The first Next Gen Bar will be administered in July. But then there's AI. Artificial intelligence is having a dramatic impact on the profession, a dramatic impact on education, not just legal education, but higher ed. And it's going to cause us really to both think about the challenges it will pose to how we educate our students and how much we also have to think about what they will confront in a changed profession and what's required of them. And that may mean that they have to have a deeper level of knowledge to engage with the outcomes, the outputs of that technology, that they're going to have to not only need to know how to use the technology, but really interpret what it's telling, what it's providing them in terms of work product and perspective. So that's going to be a challenge. Our school has implemented has started an AI transformation planning process We have a few programs that we're implementing. We've made some curricular changes already, but that's broad scale. It'll sweep across our academic program, but also all of our operating units will have a unique AI plan, both helping us to operate efficiently, but of course the ethical use of AI is everything. So when we talk about transformation, it's got to make sure that there are significant guardrails and also understanding what's expected of everyone when they engage.
Well, thank you so much for telling us more about New York's law school. Congratulations on hitting 15 years of service as their dean and on your reappointment for an additional 5. Best of luck with this summer, and looking forward to hearing about additional accomplishments by you, your law school, and your fellow New York deans. Thanks so much for being a guest.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this conversation and want to listen to additional conversations with thought leaders in legal education, please check out your favorite podcast channels or the Aspen Leading Edge podcast page. Thank you.